and welcome back to the NSE 5 journey with me, Ryan. In this next section, we're going to move on to part 5 within the FortiManager. This will be the last part before we move on to the FortiAnalyzer. In this video, we're going to talk about reporting and logging and some additional operations such as high availability. For those who don't know, you can contact me here on YouTube, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So what's the plan and where are we? So far we have gone from stages 1, 2, 3 and 4. We started with the introduction, understanding the FortiManager, why someone would need a FortiManager and what it can offer the business. We then went through the system settings, which is applying the FortiManager IP, routing, DNS, SNMP settings and understanding where it would actually fit inside the network and how we could utilize the different types of ADOMs. We then moved into Device Manager, an overview of adding devices into the FortiManager and some of the settings that you would expect to find, which are device specific, such as pushing down DNS settings, pushing down interface configuration, new VLANs and so forth. And then we compared that to the policy and objects, which was the most recent element that we went over. We understood how policy templates are created and how you would create objects within the FortiManager and install them downstream onto the device, and how you can also export policy objects into the FortiManager onto different templates and install a single template onto multiple devices. In this section, which is section 5, we're going to have a discussion around logging and reporting and a few miscellaneous items that didn't fit in within the 1 to 4 of the sections that we've completed so far. So the first thing that we're going to have a discussion about in this section is the logging and reporting element the FortiManager gives us. Now, first thing to know with the FortiManager is I've previously mentioned it, but it's identical to the FortiAnalyzer. Meaning any report, any chart and any data set that's exported and put onto the FortiManager can also be produced and created inside the FortiAnalyzer, and the same to be true the other way. The reason that you would not have login and all your reporting on a FortiManager is simply because of the capacity on the device. The FortiManager is designed to manage and maintain your entire Fortinet estate. It's not going to be able to handle high amount of login and a lot of reports being generated. But if you want to have a feel of what you can do within the FortiAnalyzer and you have a FortiManager currently, then you can enable the FortiAnalyzer within the FortiManager and have a few reports running and get a feel of what you can actually achieve if you were to get a dedicated box. And to do that, you simply go to the system settings and enable the FortiAnalyzer features. Now, as I said, the FortiManager will have limited capacity, meaning if your FortiManager is a low-end device and a dedicated device, you'd normally see that it can only handle around 2 gigs of reports, or 2 gig of login, I should say. Depending on your model, whether that's virtual, physical, and the specs and licensing you have, it may be able to handle more, but ultimately you're going to be limited from a capacity element. The FortiManager will only handle so many logs being sent to it. But again, with the logs you do get, you can create any report and get a feel of what reports you may want moving forward. Now, just like the FortiAnalyzer, the FortiManager uses the same SQL database, meaning that again, the data sets on both are identical. Now, the beauty of this is if you were to have the FortiManager with the FortiAnalyzer features enabled, you could go ahead and create some of the basic reports that you think you might need or you might want emailed to a customer. And then when the FortiAnalyzer is up and running, you can simply export and import that information. One key thing to keep in mind is the FortiAnalyzer will reboot when you enable the FortiAnalyzer feature set. Unlike previously where we enabled ADOMs and the ADOMs didn't reboot the device, it just simply kicked you out while it rearranged the GUI. In this case, if you enable the features for the FortiAnalyzer, it will reboot the device. And when it comes back and you log back in to the FortiManager, you're going to see you have a few tabs available to you, and they're going to be the Reporting tab, the FortiView tab, and the Event Management tab. Now the Reporting tab simply allows you to create reports. There's going to be a set of charts, and those charts are going to be referencing some data sets. So for example, you could have a chart to find out someone's usage and a data set retrieved from the FortiGate of showing maybe the Fortinet single sign-on information, which is linked up to an AD. So you can pull reports such as what a particular user's been doing or what websites someone has been on. You can then put that into a report, maybe add a company logo, schedule it to be sent once a week, and send it to the relevant party. The FortiView will gather all your logs together and display them in a friendly manner. So for example, things you would find in the FortiView are things like top 10 destinations that people have been browsing to, top 10 sources, who's been generating most of the traffic, top 10 conversations, who's been speaking to who within the network, and so forth. Then lastly, the event management section. These are events that happen on the FortiManager or on the devices that it manages. And these are events such as a VPN going down or someone changing and creating new users on the FortiManager. You're able to create an event and have that event alert someone. So for example, you could have it alert every time someone is created or every time someone's permissions are modified. You can make sure that that event is actually logged and emailed to the system administrator, so they can keep track of what permissions people have inside their FortiManager. Okay, so here we are, just going to log into the FortiManager and we'll turn on the Analyzer feature set. So once we're logged in, we're going to go to the System Settings tab. And within the System Settings, on the dashboard, we have the System Information widget, the same place we enable and disable the ADOMs. Just at the bottom, you've got the option to enable or disable the FortiAnalyzer features. By default, this is disabled, so we're going to click Enabled. It actually warns you to say you're about to enable the FAS features, so the FortiAnalyzer features. The system will reboot to apply the change. So I'll click OK, and it will come up to say it's rebooting, and we can just hit F5 to refresh the browser in a moment. Okay, so here we are back up. You can log back in. Would help if we put the right username in. And straight away, you're going to see these new tabs. We've got the FortiView tab, and like I previously said, there is no data inside this FortiManager, but if there were Fortinet devices reporting in, it would collaborate these logs that it's receiving and it will start putting them in summary views for you. And then just down the bottom you have the option to actually browse the logs, import, download the actual logs, and create custom views. So it's easy to digest the data that you're actually receiving. This is also a common thing to create a dashboard here and then put the dashboard onto maybe a monitor so you can see any top threats that may be coming in and maybe attacking your Fortinet estate. We've also got the events management, so you can see there's already been an event, which was it failed to connect to the Fortinet server to download the signatures and updates and so forth. And it tells you the severity, whether it's medium, low, high, and then you can acknowledge this and it will disappear, or you can create an event handler, and you create the event handlers. There's a bunch already set up for you, and if you right click and click edit, you can edit different properties about the event and set up notifications to maybe send an email or send an alert to a syslog server and so forth. So these are events that happen across the estate and on the FortiManager itself. And then, like I previously said, you have the Reports tab. This is one of the main features of the FortiAnalyzer. you have a bunch of reports down the left hand side. Each of these reports contains multiple charts, and the charts are pulled from what's called data sets. So the data sets are where, if you have a view at a data set, for example, you're going to see the SQL database and what logs. So for example, on this particular one, on the log type, which is classed as traffic, this SQL script is going to go in and pull out particular information and then put it into a chart for you. And if you go into the chart library, there's a bunch of already predefined charts. So for example, attacks over HTTP, HTTPS, or device by operating system. And then you can create, clone, and change these charts and put mobile charts into a single report. And again, there are already a lot of reports for you. If we, for example, click on email report, we can see that this report was never ran. If we click run report, it will run the report for us. If we go onto configuration, we can enable a schedule to say how often we want this report to run, and we can create a notification profile, which is actually done down here, to say how often or who we want a report to be emailed to. So for example, like I said, the drop down is empty because I don't have one, but if we clicked on output profile, create new, we can pop in the name, email address, and the recipient that we want the email to go to. Once that's all filled out and the system settings has SMTP details, you can go back into the report. I think it was email report we were on. Go to configuration, enable notification, select your profile, and then have the report emailed. Advanced settings allows you to change the actual report itself. So maybe you want to change the header text or upload a logo rather than using the Fortinet logo. And the layout shows you which charts are actually part of the report. So we can see the top senders by number of emails, top recipients by number of emails. These are individual charts within the chart library that's been added in here. If we want to add more, we can simply click on this icon up here and it will list all the charts, including any custom charts that we've created. We can add any filters to any charts, select the size of it, and then simply edit the text that are above each chart. And then you can go in here and generate the report to see what the report actually looks like. And if you're happy with that, then actually turn on the notification to email it out. Each of these tabs will be within the individual add-ons. So we said previously that if you go into the system settings and go into administrative domains and enable it, it will kick you out while it rearranges the GUI. And if we were to log back in, you can see different types of add-ons, and each add-on will have access to each FortiAnalyzer feature. So again, that's something to keep in mind, because as I said, the FortiManager is limited in its capacity that is willing to accept logs. If your estate has the FortiAnalyzer feature set turned on, you may want to restrict what add-ons have access to that, and you can simply doing that by changing which admins have access to which tabs using the administrative profiles. To get more of an in-depth around the different types of reports and what you can do inside the Event Manager and FortiView, I'd highly recommend just having a quick look over the FortiManager handbook. It will kind of give you a rough idea of what to expect in these areas and get you started with how to create your custom reports. But to be honest with you, 9 out of 10 times is very straightforward, and you should be able to figure out what reports you need. You're going to find that the tricky thing would be understanding which dataset and SQL information you should have against a particular report and how that information should be displayed. But I would highly recommend looking at the existing reports, finding one that's very similar to what you're trying to achieve, clone it and modify it. You're going to find that saves you a lot more time than trying to create a report from scratch, because if you want to create a report, you're going to have to create your charts and then you're going to have to create your data sets. So look at what's there, clone it, modify it, make it your own. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next topic, which is high availability, HA. But one thing I will say is the reporting, charts and everything we've discussed briefly, we will get onto a bit more when we dive into the FortiAnalyzer section. So what is there to know about the HA, the high availability with the FortiManager? Well, first of all, you would have one main device and the other devices will sit in passive, meaning all your changes are made on one device. So in total you can have 5 devices participating in high availability. That's the 1 primary device and the 4 secondary devices. The HA sync is performed over SSL and it uses TCP port 5199, something you might want to remember, and this is sometimes referred to as the heartbeat. So it would be a constant heartbeat between the primary and the secondaries, and it's performed over SSL, so you know any synchronization is nice and secure. Now latency is not a problem, and normally in some sort of HA environment latency is a problem because the changes need to be done in real time. Well, that is somewhat true with the FortiManager, but at somewhat also not true. And what do I mean by that? Well, in an ideal environment we obviously want all of our FortiManagers to be in sync and on par with each other's configurations, but since it's not really affecting in life because you still need to install it downstream onto devices, any changes you make, then we can have that few second delay or maybe even a minute or so delay between the synchronization. And because we can tolerate that delay, it allows us to have our FortiManagers geographically separated without any hassle. So an example would be, let's say you're trying to go for high availability and you want it to be fully resilient, then in that case you can pop them in 2 different data centers in 2 different locations, maybe even all 4 data centers or 4 different FortiManagers in different areas, and they can all sync back without any issues regardless of what speed and access technology they're all connected with. Now the changes are made on the primary and they're synced onto all the secondary devices. And lastly, we need to talk about what behavior to expect. Now what I mean by that is what behavior happens in a failed scenario. Now if the primary fails, you must manually reconfigure one of the secondary devices to become the primary device. It's not an automatic failover. And then the other thing you have to do is if you have multiple secondary devices, you have to reconfigure them to point to the new primary device. But rebooting is not required when promoting a secondary to a primary. So it might be you think to yourself, it's a bit of a pain that when the primary dies you have to promote the secondary yourself. But if you have multiple secondaries, obviously it would be nice maybe if there was an automation or maybe like a priority order which they promote themselves. But ultimately for now you have to manually promote that device. And like I said, if the FortiManager were to die, it wouldn't actually cause a outage as such because it's not actually part of the data plane. It's not passing any traffic. It's only kind of handling the control element. Now, if a secondary FortiManager dies, so you can reconfigure the primary device to remove the peer, so remove the secondary device, or you can leave it inside the FortiManager, the primary FortiManager, which will obviously report in the event management that something has died, and then when the secondary is back up and online, it will automatically resynchronize with the primary. So that's 9 out of 10 times what you want to do. Now, what is actually synchronized? All the device configuration, including the global database, all the configuration revisions. So if a change has been made, you need to revert it back. Now, things that are not so much synced, FortiGuard. So something we kind of haven't talked about yet, but the FortiManager can double up as a FortiGuard database, and all your devices can connect into the FortiManager and download its signatures and firmware updates rather than each device having breakout to Fortinet. Well, if that is a job that your FortiManager is doing, then it has to be synced to the FortiGuard and they have their own separate databases. So if your primary is the only one that's set up with FortiGuard and it fails, you need to make sure your secondary is set up with FortiGuard. And anything that's local to the device, so any SNMP settings, log settings, console settings and data about the FortiManager, that is also not synced between FortiManagers. So thing to keep in mind there is, like I said, the HA does not support takeover. If it dies, it has to require administrators to go in and resolve the situation. Okay, so that's all we've got time for in this lesson. Let's just have a quick summary of what we've done. We first of all had a discussion around the reporting and login. We went over the new tabs that it introduces, which is the FortiView tab, the Event Management tab, and the Reports tab. And then we logged in and enabled those features. We've done that under the System Settings section within the System Info widget. We said that when you enable these settings through the system settings, it will reboot the device. So make sure you have a change window or authorization before doing so. And then a few things to remember. The FortiManager is just like a FortiAnalyzer. It has all of the features, the reports, the login, and so forth. The only thing that it limits is the capacity of which it can retrieve the logs. So if you have a lot of devices transmitting logs towards the FortiManager, it's only going to accept so much. But like I said, the beauty of this is you can enable the functionality of the FortiAnalyzer within the FortiManager, configure, play, and build the reports that you wish. And when your analyzer goes live, you can export and import into that. We then had a brief overview of the HA, and we said that it runs over the SSL TCP port 5199. So this is where the heartbeat is sent. It's important that you know how many devices can be configured as parts of HA. But more importantly, one thing that I would highly recommend you know is the behaviors. So what happens if a primary dies, what happens if the secondary dies, and what you need to do as an administrator if the primary were to die. It's also important to remember what is and isn't synchronized between the devices. In the next video, we're going to go into actually configuring HA. I haven't tried it on the trial VMs, but we'll go ahead and see what we can actually do with multiple FortiManagers. I hope this video has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing, and if it has been, please do like and subscribe.